And we begin our session this evening following on from the previous conversations we've been sharing with you about the coming of the cosmic Christ from an amazing book written by Matthew Fox. And this book was written first in 1984. And a lot of what it shares is so poignant for today, especially since the big shift on the 21st of December. Tonight we're going to follow on and we're going to look at the etymology of mysticism, a big word, but basically looking at the history of mysticism and what is mysticism. Matthew asks the question, what is meant by mysticism? He says, let us begin our exploration with the etymological meanings of the word. The word mysticism comes from the Greek word mystikos, which seems to have two basic meanings: to shut one's senses and to enter the mysteries. These two meanings are related because one is more fully opened to the mysteries to the extent that one, paradoxically, has learned to shut one's senses, for example, has ceased projecting and is open-minded. The two spiritual traditions of the West, that of full redemption or aesthetic spirituality, and that of creation-centered or original blessing spirituality, will interpret the word mystikos differently. The former will interpret the phrase shut one's senses in the sense of mortification, from the Latin to put to death of the senses. I can acquaint with that, having been a Catholic nursing monk for 8 years, and there was a lot of putting to death one's senses, especially the first Fridays of every month, when if you had an impure thought, in went the cold shower. Or in our case, it was a cold bath. Not very nice. But he goes on to say, thus we find in full redemption spiritual writers a great deal of writing on mortification of the senses. When a mortification of the senses ideology links up with a distrust of the body and nature, then we equate mysticism with an asceticism understood as control over passion, senses and the self. Such denigration of the blessing that passions are serves well a basic patriarchal ideology of power over others, persons, creatures, and elevate the soul. But Wendell Berry has this to say: the aesthetic full redemption tradition in Christian spirituality strongly advocates a mortification of the senses. A book published earlier in this century, Directorum Aestheticum, Guide to the Spiritual Life, which included a preface and an imprimatur by a cardinal and was translated into several languages, informs us of a nun so holy that she never allowed herself to look at or touch any part of her person. Even such as decency does not require us to veil. When she was sick in bed, she asked her spiritual director's permission to wear stockings, since she considered it unbecoming to touch one naked foot with another. Oh, how bizarre. In the same volume we learn that Bishop St. Hugh though compelled by his pastoral charge to deal with women, had never for 40 years looked one in the face. But where was he? And St. Aloysius, we are informed, never mixed his eyes on the countenance of any woman, not even of his own mother. Not only are women excluded from the male mystic experience in this aesthetic tradition, but so is the rest of creation. We are told that St. Lawrence Justinian, even when he might blamelessly have used his eyes, abstained from contemplating the beauty of the country and the foliage of the trees, which grew in his private garden. A holy nun called Sarah lived in a monastery of Sictia near a fountain for 40 years and never cast one single look at the fountain. That is so sad. Wow. And it goes on. Wow. This perverse understanding of mysticism as mortification of the senses renders the term mysticism pejorative in the West. The creation-centered tradition does not traffic in mortification of the senses because it recognizes passion, body, senses, and sensuality as part of that divine gift. That original blessing that touches the depths of awe and gratitude in our lives. There is no regret for being body in the creation tradition and no need to punish the body or to seek mastery over it or over others. Thank the Lord. Compassion is the basic energy force and indeed moral norm of this tradition, and as Meister Eckhart put it, compassion begins at home, with my body and with my soul. How can we become compassionate towards others if we are not compassionate toward that basic gift we have all received, namely our bodies? The creation tradition understands the discipline of shutting one's senses as developing our capacity for letting go of sensory input at times, that we might sink into silence and nothingness, experience solitude and celebrate it and learn from it. One might say that the shutting of senses means to pull the plug regularly on the television set or to go out occasionally to the desert, into the woods or to the sea, or to just be. There is no moral imperative for shutting down the senses because they are evil or out of control. Rather, we let go of sensory input because the input itself may be poisonous or polluted, or simply overwhelming to soul and body. Thus one does shut off one's senses as a kind of purification, not because the senses are evil, but because they are such blessings that they deserve a house cleaning in order to be renewed and restored. The purification is not so much of the senses as of the sensory input to which they have been subjected. And psychologist Arthur Dykman calls this process Deutomatization, forgive me, it's a big word. De-automization, got it. The senses can be so bombarded by the onslaught of day-to-day input that true beauty is lost or forgotten. I have referred to these awakening and cleansing exercises as tactical ecstasies. In We All the Way Home, a guide to sensual, prophetic spirituality. They are means and not an end. The end is to awaken rather than deaden the senses. The second meaning of mystikos, to enter the mysteries, also has a very different meaning in full redemption and creation-centered ideologies. In the full redemption tradition, enter the mysteries has come to mean the mysteries of cult, of sacraments, defined usually as ecclesiastical liturgical rites. The creation-centered tradition backs up, so to speak, to the primal sacrament, the primal mystery that is the universe itself. It calls for a spiritual awakening to the mystery of the universe and our existence in it. Re-entering that mystery is fundamentally a holy act, a sacred discipline. We must call upon the spiritual athlete within ourselves to enter that mystery fully. Here is where the creation tradition redeems the word aesthetic, which originally meant to be an athlete, not an athlete at mortifying one's senses, but an athlete at engaging the mystery of one's existence in the context of the mystery of the universe. The universe is, after all, the proper setting for and the source of all energy, for rendering ritual, cults, and sacraments effective. Thus, by returning to the mystery of the universe as a starting point for the mystical journey, the creation tradition de-anthropocizes liturgy and gives it life again. In this fuller context of a mysticism grounded in the ultimate mystery of the universe, liturgy receives its primary powers, its primary source, for its symbols and its work of healing and empowerment. Cosmologist Brian Swimme in The Universe is a Green Dragon provides the basis for a renewed mysticism and the sacraments, beginning with the primal sacraments of the sea, land, life, fire, wind. And this is what he writes: we sometimes fall into the delusion that power is elsewhere, that we are unable to find access to it. Nothing could be further from the truth. The universe oozes with power, waiting for anyone who wishes to embrace it. But because the powers of the cosmic dynamics are invisible, we need to remind ourselves of the universal presence. Who reminds us? The rivers, plains, galaxies, hurricanes, lightning, branches, and all our living companions. not only is the universe a great mystery, and therefore a source of mysticism, but our bodies are too. One person's brain is more complex than all the electronic circuitry in existence. The human heart daily accomplishes work equivalent to lifting a ton from the ground to the top of a 5-story building. According to scientist Guy Murchie, the body can be understood as a corporation with 100 organs, 200 bones, 600 muscles, trillions of cells, octillion of atoms, all working together to make a whole person. No one could critically examine it without a respect amounting to awe. The body, like the universe, is a source of awe, and therefore a source of mysticism. The creation tradition understands mysticism primarily as our entering the fullness of the mystery of our existence, the gift and blessing of creation itself. The mysterious universe we enter includes the universe of our mind and imaginations, memories and bodies, as well as the mysteries of the cosmos itself. But given the wounds of the human condition, to enter these mysteries as fully as possible, some letting go is needed, some returning to a space of emptiness and openness and primal ability to wonder. To enter the mystery and to be able to wonder is to miss the power and splendor of the journey, and to miss the power and splendor of the giver of the journey, the giver of creation, the giver of the gift. And Matthew is saying something here about the denial of the mystic, which you may find interesting. It does get a bit heavy, but it gives you a lot of good stuff, background information and anecdotal evidence of the different traditions within the church, for example, where you had the nun who refused to look at the fountain, and the other poor nun who never even looked at her body and had to ask her spiritual director for permission to put on her stockings. Dear Lord, I mean, it's unbelievable to the depths that people go to impose mortification on the body. About 20 years ago, during the so-called sexual revolution, Western society dealt with the issue of the denial of our sexuality. This awakening to our sexuality was a long process, evolving over a period of at least a century. It was set in motion by modern psychology, beginning with our beloved Sigmund Freud. I'm sure you'll have heard of Sigmund Freud. About 10 years ago, with the pioneer work of physician Elizabeth Kubler-Ross and of Pulitzer Prize winner author Ernest Becker, we began to deal in earnest with the denial of death. It is time now to address the pressing issue of Western society's dangerous and dismal denial of the mystic. Here we go. Our denial of the mystic is evident in the way we treat Mother Earth as object, and indeed in the way we generally treat the maternal principle as negative force in our lives. the mystic may well be understood as the shadow side of the Western personality. Why should we explore this unknown and often repressed element of our psyches and personalities? Hildegard of Bingen, a great warrior, says that this worst thing the devil can say to the human race is, "O human, you do not even know who you are." If we are mystics but do not know we are mystics, then we are indeed in the clutches of the demoniac, for we do not even know who we are. And over the last few months on the Twilight Vigil, we've been challenging each other. Who am I? Who am I really? And why am I here? Unless we know who we are and our purpose for being here, then I'm afraid we're in a limbo, a place of limbo. We have to face our fear, and we have to embrace the question and answer it. Who am I? And why am I here? Alice Miller tells us that depression is the result of being separated from one's true self. Now that's an interesting point of view, because in Western society there are more cases of depression spiraling, where so many are actually on mind-altering drugs to relieve their depression. And that must say something about the causation of depression. And it says here that Alice Miller tells us that depression is the result of being separated from one's true self. Denial. And the evil one uses that as a tool to enslave us to fear. That is so interesting, isn't it? That depression is caused by a denial of who we truly are, denying our true self. It says that the mystical dimension of our psyches is part of our true self, but our culture teaches us to deny it, and thus educates us for depression, which eventually leads to despair. Miller evaluates our culture as one enmeshed in depression, and believes that our century is unique for its commitment to depression. This depressive culture is the end result of a civilization that for the past 300 years has denigrated the mystic. Miller also defines the opposite of depression, not as gaiety or absence of pain, but as vitality. Excuse me. People who are full of vitality, full of joy. Don't you envy them? While doing a workshop on the mystical journey according to Meister Eckhart's 4 paths, a woman told me this story. Here goes. I told my psychiatrist this week that I thought I might be a mystic. Her response was, "You probably have epilepsy. Take these chemical tests over the weekend and we will discuss it next week." The woman went on, "You know, after hearing Meister Eckhart and you expound on mysticism, I think I might quite quit my psychiatrist next week." The woman went on, "You know, after hearing Meister Eckhart and you expound on mysticism, I think I will." I'm not sure at all if I have any need for her any longer. So there you go. Your workshop has pretty much convinced me that I am a mystic after all. 2 months later, I met this woman again. She had terminated psychiatric treatment, was saving money, and enjoying life more as a mystic, not an epileptic. Now, isn't that amazing? Is this story an isolated instance? Certainly not. In my numerous travels throughout North America, Europe and Australia, to do workshops, play shops in creation mysticism over the past 15 years, I have encountered the same reality. All kinds of persons are waking up to the mystic within them today. Yet how seldom this awakening, this resurrection that presages the awakening and resurrection of Mother Earth herself is welcomed or nourished in our society. Gregory Bateson calls the repression of the mystical pathological, and cultural historian Jose Arguelles declares that a dictatorship of reason in the modern era of Western culture has banished mysticism as a branch of the insane. Isn't that tragic? Those who say they're mystic are banished insane. I find that so tragic, that those who've been given the gift of mysticism, of being able to see and sense the presence of God, have been banished by society as being insane. And it's an amazing story, and Matthew Fox really gets into the nitty-gritty of the coming of the cosmic Christ. It's an eye-opener. Though this book is, 1984, it's falling apart. It's one of the first editions. I got it for 65p on Amazon. And I tell you, it's an amazing book, because it challenges you to ask yourself the question which we should have asked years ago. He goes on. How many Protestants know that one of Martin Luther's most important influences, by his own admission, was the Theologia Germanica, a mystical work of the 14th century from the Eckhartian school of spirituality? I didn't know that, but I do now. And I love Eckhart, Meister Eckhart. His works are so profound, as are that of Hildegard of Bingen, the Benedictine abbess of the same time. He says, or that John Toller, a student of Eckhart, deeply influenced Martin Luther. The liberal Protestant theologian of our century, Reinhold Niebuhr, called mysticism a heresy, and Anders Nygren, Bishop of Lund, called it the acme of egocentric piety. Students in Protestant, Roman Catholic, and Rabbinic seminaries do not generally receive solid courses on the mystical tradition of Judaism and Christianity. Matthew says, I once lectured at a prominent Protestant seminary located at a famous Ivy League school, and was told by a student, who said she and others had begged for courses on the mystics. Wow. Wow. That the dean of the theology school and other professors felt that mysticism is a fad. Recently, I received a letter from a person who, like many others, had found it necessary to leave his Western faith roots in order to get serious about meditation and mystical practices. He wrote, "It is ironic, as you certainly know, that we have to leave the seminary and even get outside the church, as I have done, in order to discover the wealth of our Christian heritage, of mysticism, and especially the great mystics of the Dominican order, which were rarely spoken about in Matthew's seminary background." We deny the mystic also when we publish amateurish extrapolations about mysticism. And there I'm going to shut the book and give the brain cells a rest, because it was a heavy subject, quite heavy for you, the dear viewer, to have to listen to. So what I'd like to do is to wind it up and just share with you the truth. And you might find this interesting. It's strange that as a young nursing monk in the Catholic Church for 8 years, we were sort of brainwashed in a lot of respects. Brainwashed from exploring the senses, from exploring truths. Like Mary Magdalena, when I remember her feast day was coming up in July. I was a young novice in 67. And I heard the readings from the Bible and I thought, that's not true. Why are we celebrating a lie? And I remember going to the novice master who was in charge of us, and he was a tyrant. And a part of me regrets asking him, but my heart does not regret it. My head regrets it because I made myself look a fool, but my heart set me free. I got punished for daring to question the teaching of the church that Magdalena was a whore, a prostitute, a slut. And the punishment I got, I was taken by the novice master to a huge, massive building in Ireland, in Cork. And I was literally dragged up these steps to this huge mausoleum. And the door was so 14th century, it was untrue. And he pulled this long metal cleaver, and you could hear a bell in the distance. And guess what? This lovely old nun entered, opened the door with a face, well, it didn't look angelic, it looked very weathered, beaten. And she looked stressed. And she had this huge habit on. And there must have been layers and layers and layers of material. And I looked, a young man, I was 17 years old. I could see this enormous ring, metal ring with keys on it. And I'm not exaggerating. They weren't your Yale lock. They were Victorian keys. You know, the long with the small little bit that you put in and you turn it with both hands. Those sort of keys. And in the distance, because I've got very good hearing, I could hear screaming. And it disturbed me. And I looked at the novice master and he dismissed it. It's as if it's nothing for you to worry about. But it played on my mind. I asked him, And I guess I got labelled a troublemaker because I was always questioning, why were we hearing screaming from a convent? And apparently it turned out to be a Magdalene laundry, where the Mary Magdalene supposedly went for having children outside wedlock. And it broke my heart to think that the church I was a member of, a young monk in training, could do that to young girls. I found it abhorrent, and it did disturb me. And I still refuse to accept that Mary Magdalene was a prostitute. What we've just shared with you this evening is the two traditions, the liberal and the progressive take on mysticism. That poor nun who had never touched her body in 40, 50, 60 years, and the other one who'd never looked at it, not even the fountain in the monastery garden. This puritanical, unhealthy. And then the nun having to ask her spiritual director, could she put on stockings? Because she was afraid of one foot touching the other. Now, that's what I call the evil of buying into the letter of the law. And it kills the spirit. And my heart goes out to Matthew Fox, who wrote that book, because he was a brilliant Dominican theologian. And because he explored Gaia, Mother Earth, the divine feminine, creation spirituality, a lot of what we know today is down to Matthew. But he got excommunicated more or less and defrocked by the present Pope, who was then Cardinal Ratzinger, for daring to challenge the church. But he didn't challenge the church. He was explaining a truth which the church misinterpreted, as it did for many others of us. For many of us, we were punished for speaking what God was giving to our heart. But Matthew said something there which was profound, and it's given a tear to my eye, because he said, in leaving the church, being ostracized from his church family by the church, when he stood on the outside looking in, he then realized what mysticism meant, as I do today. I'm on the outside of my religious family, the church, looking in as a lay monastic, but I'm not controlled as I was the young monk by the fear and abiding to the letter of the law, because that's how we've done it since the 14th century. I'm a free spirit. And it's only since I renounced that hold and started on my own journey to find who this God, man, woman was, that I'm in the place where I'm at today. Because my heart rules my head. Whereas when I was a Catholic nursing monk, my head of fear destroyed my heart. It killed my heart, leaving me embittered and obviously depressed. And we read in the book, depression is the result of those who do not face who they truly are. They run away. So I leave you this evening with this reflection. And it's from my heart. It's not from the book. If we refuse to see who we are as a child of God, a child of love, if we refuse to see that, to embrace that, then our life is all the more poorer. And I believe that we will never know internal joy. We will never have that interior peace within that gives us the courage to embrace who we truly are as a child of God. And today I believe that Gaia and Mother Earth, who is Mother Earth, with the divine feminine, the cosmic Christ, Mother Mary, and all of the great spiritual teachers, the Lord Buddha, Vishnu, Ganesh, Krishna, Gandhi, Sri Chimoy, Jesus, Francis, the whole caboodle. They're trying to speak to our hearts, to say, take a step back and hold things very lightly. They're inviting us to come from fear and control and enslavement to guilt, to religion, a religion that holds us in the grip of fear. And they're calling us to surrender our heart to the mystical heart of God, to Gaia. And as a contemplative lay monastic who embraces the simple life, I embrace my God in the cathedral of nature, the landscape, where I dance with brother sun and sister moon. When the birds sing, they're the choristers of God, for they sing to my heart. And my little friend, when I'm troubled, the little red robin that's followed me for years, lands on my kitchen window or my prayer window here, and I know that my God is present through a bird, a red robin, through nature. And today the cosmic Christ is inviting you too to surrender your heart to love, so that you will see what the mystics once seen, that you will see the face of God, and that you will live, and that you will have the peace of God, without all the ritual, the dogma, the fear, the guilt. The habit I wear is not about saying to you, oh, I'm a big Catholic. I'm not. Yes, I follow the teachings of Jesus, and I love St. Francis. But I also love Gandhi, and I also respect the teachings of the Lord Buddha. And I'm thankful for the great masters like Rumi and Osho and Mia Baba, for they all left us a blueprint of love, to fall in love with the supreme within our heart. That's it. I ask the Father, Mother God to bless you, whoever you are, wherever you may be. And I ask our beloved Earth Mother Gaia, in the presence of the divine feminine aspect of God, to touch you right now and fill you with a love of the supreme in you, that you can embrace who you truly are and love yourself. Thank you for joining me. And for those who want punishment and purification, I'm back at midnight on this channel for a 30-minute reflection and meditation with the Cosmic Christ. If you can't join me, it's recorded. But for now, God bless you. Take care. Take care.